book, Battle Hymn, I began reading it earlier in the week, and I have to tell you that for about the last 3 days, I've had a solid knot in my stomach. And I'm not real squeamish about most things. The problem is that, while some may say, you're fear-mongering, you really are, you're fear-mongering, this is your stock in trade, you're just a, insert expletive of your choice there. It's not true. I would like for you to think of this as something slightly different than what you may think. This is a very, very exciting time to be alive. And as our previous guest, Douglas Dietrich, don't you feel like you've run a mile after you've talked an hour with him? He has so much information to offer. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But I always enjoy talking to him. But here's the thing. Fear-mongering is not what we do. This is a very exciting time to be alive. Going back to the Japanese thing he was talking about and how they'd gotten a little bit soft, it's one of the rules of martial arts. Well, not a rule, but a saying is that a good chair does not make us more fit. The laziness of a human being is unbelievable. You're standing and you get tired and you want to sit. You sit for a while and pretty soon you want to lie down. This is not the time to lie down. And I want to remind you of something that you already know. But I'm just reminding you. A very, very evolved society, a civilization called Germany, descended into darkness and took a lot of people with them. The whole place was destroyed, cut in half. The Russians took half. We took half. Those people endured misery. Not everybody was behind the Nazis. Many people were not. Many people were kept in the dark until it was too bloody late to do anything about anything except just ride it out, like crashing a motorcycle. You just have to wait and see how bad it's going to be. So I'm calling General Quarters tonight. I want all hands to man your intellectual battle stations. And if you don't feel like fighting, well, we'll just have to fight for you. We will return with John Scura, author of Battle Hymn, when we return on Coast to Coast AM. John B. Wells in with you tonight, and our guest for the remainder of the program is John Scura. Welcome, John, to the bridge of the mothership.
Thank you, John. Glad to be with you.
You know, your book is amazing, and it really, I'm not being phony baloney here. I have literally been upset ever since I started reading it because these conspiracy theories are no longer conspiracy theories. They're actual conspiracies. They've been going on for a long time. And your book is about 1.5 inches thick, and it is packed with everything. So let's begin by just talking about you and what motivated you to write this book. You are well, good grief, you've done so much. It's amazing. You're a journalist and an author and Emmy nominated and a writer and a producer and all of that. And then your partner in this endeavor,
Dean Phillips.
Yeah, Dean Phillips. He's I just vapor locked for a second because I'm reading all of his bona fides here, and he's Daystar Industries, analytical thinker, visionary entrepreneur, and you see, I don't know, it's almost as though he comes from the Christian side of things. You're coming from the secular side of. Did I just step on a landmine there?
Well,
if I
no,
did,
actually,
just straighten me out.
You just nailed it pretty well. Dane is very active in the Christian movement, and he takes that tack when approaching this material. He was calling me quite a bit about this stuff back in 2010, and was obviously fascinated with it. So we kicked it around and decided, maybe it would be a book. I insisted that I do my own independent parallel investigation. I wanted to avoid getting into the Christian stuff and religion and stuff like that. I just wanted it to be a very sober journalistic report on, some of these problems that we're living through today. And that's how the book came about. And he was kind enough just to give me my head on this thing and allow me to run off and, research and find out what I could. And we wound up with about close to 700 pages of manuscript.
Yes, well, you have over 400 pages in the finished form, and the thing is that it just goes through everything. Well, let me just read from page 9 here, and I'll be brief. The Rockefeller file is not fiction. It is compact, powerful, and frightening. The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies to create a one-world government combining super-capitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in its scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent. That's Congressman Larry McDonald, 1975. In 81, he called for a comprehensive congressional investigation of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. On September 183, he died aboard Korean Airlines Flight 007 when it was shot down by a Soviet interceptor after accidentally straying over the Sakhalin Islands.
Right.
And it just rolls from there all the way through. So the Rothschilds, the Morgans, this is an amazing work. So just where shall we begin? Because there's so much, but we have time, so...
Well, yeah, we can begin with the puppet masters. That's what I call them in the book. There's a collection of incredibly wealthy families. None of us can really imagine the kind of wealth that they have. These are the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Rothschilds, the Harrimans, and so on. For generations, they've had this sort of vision of creating a one-world government with a single currency and a single religion and so forth. And, it all sounds like a sweet dream until you finally realize what they want. And, basically all they want is control, more control, as if they don't have enough already. And, like I said, this has been generational. It's actually, if you follow it all the way back, goes back to the 18th century. With Rothschild and, the Illuminati there.
Well, and then there's a Freemason crossover in here somewhere with Albert Pike. I think his book came out in 1789 or one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
This is a really deep rabbit hole, and we should advise the listeners that this is going to be a pretty amazing ride. But I just thought, well, let me just do some checking here, and I have found nothing. I have found no holes in this work whatsoever.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in the preface, I refused myself to use the word conspiracy because that word has become such a no-no. I mean, it's, the press makes you sound like a moron, an idiot, a wacko, if you use that word. So I refuse to use it. I will quote other people in using it, but I don't use that word at all in the book.
So after you've had your rooftop deck, and you've had your drink and your romantic encounter on the roof, then I guess the idea is to own all of the buildings and control all of the views over whatever city you happen to be in that you wish to control. Is that the sole purpose in creating the New World Order?
Well, it's something that has to do with the entire world, but that's what they want. Eventually, the European Union is a start. A North American Union, which is sort of underway right now, is another step. The conclusion I drew is that these people just want us all off their planet. They've got that kind of arrogance and ruthlessness about them.
So these families, they want to boil it down to a couple of dozen families that will rule the earth and depopulate it largely and just keep the resources for themselves and their progeny? Yeah. And what they want basically is,
a manageable number of good workers who aren't that bright. And, do what they're told. I had a little color. I could tell you a bit about, like, the Rockefellers, for instance. John D. Rockefeller is known, by everybody. His father, William, was kind of a flim-flam man. He sold cancer cures. He taught little John, when he was a boy, to leap into his arms from a chair, and he would catch him. And one day, he just stood aside and let little John D. fall on the floor, and his exact words were, "Never trust anyone completely, not even me." So you see what kind of character they're building here.
Yes.
And John D. built a refinery in 1863, and by 1870, he incorporated Standard Oil of Ohio and formed a monopoly through the National City Bank of Cleveland, which was owned then by the Rothschilds, according to a congressional hearing. By 1880, John D. owned or controlled 95% of the oil produced in the United States. That's how successful he became. He maintained this monopoly despite attempts from Congress and the Ohio Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court to break up Standard Oil, but he just, he got around them by, passing control over to his son and, breaking up the companies into a bunch of smaller companies that he still controlled. And so by the time John Jr. came along, he decided, okay, there's a, bad impression in the public about the firm, so what we'll do is we'll start charitable things like the Rockefeller Foundation just to give us a better image, So
Right.
That's how the Rockefeller Foundation came into effect here. John Jr. had a group of sons. We all know who Nelson Rockefeller is. He began work in Latin American affairs back in the Roosevelt administration, and this was really an intelligence position. His task basically was to monopolize the raw materials of Latin America for the United States, excluding the Europeans. So we have, a good glimpse into the way the Rockefellers do business there. By the end of World War II, Nelson had been dealing with Germans living in South America for quite a while, which is obviously a potential embarrassment that David Ben-Gurion took great advantage of. Basically, he ambushed Nelson Rockefeller one day by showing him all of the documented material he had of Nelson working with these Nazis hiding out in Brazil and other parts of South America. And Nelson said, okay, what do you want? He says, well, we want an Israeli state, and you can deliver the votes of the Latin American nations in the UN. Well, the deal was struck. That's how Israel became a state. And, this was revealed by John Loftus and Mark Ahrens in their book, The Secret War Against the Jews, which used eyewitnesses as well as CIA documentation to corroborate all of this. Of course, Nelson died, while he was having sex with female staffer, Megan Marshak, who eventually would receive $50,000 and a deed to a Rockefeller New York townhouse in the will. So apparently he was very thankful to her.
Yes.
David Rockefeller is probably, the most successful in terms of power wielding. He went to the London School of Economics, which was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And, he was heavily influenced there by Harold Lasky of Britain Socialist Party. David worked for the OSS in North Africa and France during World War II, which explains his intelligence ties today. He became board chairman and CEO of Chase Manhattan Corporation. He joined the Council on Foreign Relations, which we'll talk about later, as early as 1941. And 30 years later, he formed the Trilateral Commission with generous donations from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. And he had a refocused one-world strategy for the whole thing. David came straight out. He's in his memoir, he wrote, quote, "Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal, working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it."
It says right here in the very beginning of your book, the manipulators.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quick quote from Woodrow Wilson. "Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." And the term "the New World Order" first appeared in print in 1919 with the publication of Samuel Zane Batten's book, The New World Order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's to let people know that George H.W. Bush did not invent the term.
No, although he certainly used that term a lot. And I must say that Mr. Bush Sr. just struck me as kind of a creepy guy, you know what I mean?
He doesn't come off very well at all, no.
He's just kind of like a really sinister Mr. Rogers. And no,
Yeah,
don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Can't help how you look or how you come off. But Mr. Bush creeped me out pretty bad, and I'm still not sure it was a good idea to have a former CIA director as the president. Yeah.
Well, Bush came off pretty poorly in this thing, but, a lot of Democrats do, too. That's one thing. I think one of the central things I learned from just doing this research is that there's not a dime's worth of difference between the two political parties.
Said it many times myself. Ship keeps sailing in the same direction.
Yeah. I'm kind of with the governor when he said, it's like WWE wrestling. They're at each other's throats when the cameras are on, and when the cameras are off, they're having dinner together.
Well, that's exactly right. Let's go to the Morgans.
Yeah. Well, J.P. Morgan's father, Junior Spencer Morgan, he was connected to the British Rothschilds already when J.P. was just a boy. So there was that connection there because he had traveled to England as a financier and got close to the British Rothschilds. John Pierpont Morgan, J.P., took charge of the family business near the end of the Civil War, and he worked so closely with the Rothschilds that many authors have called him a de facto agent of that foreign banking family here in America. By the 1870s, J.P. was principal source of U.S. government financing as head of J.P. Morgan and Company. He also arranged for the Rothschild capital to be invested in the growing U.S. Industrial corporations, and by 1902, he'd become a major holder in rail transport. He was powerful enough in his time to manipulate the U.S. economy, and many researchers blame him for causing a number of bank panics, specifically the Panic of 1893, after which he bailed out the U.S. government monetary reserves with $62 million in Rothschild gold. So the Rothschilds, through Morgan, are getting their teeth sunk into American economy and industry. He and the Rockefellers helped to create the Federal Reserve System. And to underscore how much the Rothschilds were into his business, when J.P. Morgan died, it was astonished. People learned that he owned just 19% of his family's business.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Now, the Rothschilds, of course, they're in the background on this whole thing, and that goes way back to 1744 when Meyer Amschel Bauer was born in Frankfurt. He apprenticed at a banking house and soon became court financier to William IX of Hesse-Kassel. He joined the Masons because William had joined. He just wanted to ingratiate himself with them. And this set a family pattern that continues to the day. The Rothschilds do business with reigning houses of Europe. They don't mess around with the lesser people.
John, before we go on, let me ask you something, because we have 2 minutes before our hard break.
Sure.
So quickly tell me, and all of us, not just me, sorry, how do these men control their children and ensure that the generations to come will do everything that the mandate calls for as time goes by?
Well, obviously, there's a certain amount of indoctrination that has to go on.
Hardcore. Yeah,
you are expected as a Rothschild to carry on the family tradition and stuff like that. That's certainly ingrained in all of them. There was in the 1990s one Rothschild, I can't recall his first name, who did very poorly. He lost millions of dollars of the family fortune on some bad investments and wound up apparently committing suicide, although he was found in a hotel room hanging from the towel rack by the rope on his terry cloth robe. Now, this guy was over 6 feet tall.
Oh, gotcha.
And the towel rack is only about 4.5 feet off the ground, so that must have been a very determined hanging.
Yes, he might as well have just stood in the meat grinder and reached down with his hand and cranked the handle himself. We will return in just a minute with John Scura, author of Battle Hymn. Consider this your wake-up call. This is the Mothership, Coast to Coast AM. Stand by. The book is Battle Hymn, and it's a good one. Therein you will find, and on tonight's program you will hear, about FEMA, the camps, the chip, the Great Recession, the corporate media, education, secret experiments, and mind control. It's all real. It's all quite real. And it's not a what if. It's already happening. But there's a flip side to that coin. You now know about it. The knowledge is out there, and it is unstoppable. I wonder if the architects of this future horror to be, anticipated that, well, their crystal ball needs to go to the shop because there may be a rub or two in their plan. We'll be back with John Scura in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Welton with you for the evening, and I do urge you to become a Coast Insider because this is one of those programs you're going to want to play back a few times because it's very rich in content. John Scura, tell us about the Council on Foreign Relations, what it started off to be, what it turned into, and then let's go from there to the Trilateral Commission and then inevitably to the Bilderberg Group. Just tell us about those people.
Okay, sure. Yeah, the Council on Foreign Relations, which we'll call from now on CFR. It was started in 1919 by Colonel Edward House, who was a very important advisor to Woodrow Wilson, and an admitted Marxist. He formed the Institute of International Affairs to promote a one-world government. This was, after World War I, when everybody was in Versailles, and they thought they were just going to remake the world. The British-based arm of this new organization was called the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the U.S.-based arm was the Council on Foreign Relations, which officially incorporated in 1921. Now, Article 2 of the CFR bylaws states that any person revealing information gleaned from CFR meetings would be omitted from membership. This flies in the face of their claim that they're just a think tank wide open to the public. Obviously, they are not. Today, the CFR numbers 3,000 to 4,000 members. They're all leaders in finance, academics, commerce, and the media. The control press, of course, paints them as an open forum, but New York Mayor John Hyland, way back in 1922, thought differently. In a speech, he said, quote, "The real menace of our republic is the invisible government. At the head is a small group of banking houses. This little coterie of international bankers virtually runs our government for its own selfish ends." Now, that was 1922. So already they're seeing through them after just 1 year of existence. Funding for the CFR did come from people like J.P. Morgan, Jacob Schiff, Bernard Baruch, Paul Vorburg, along with Rockefeller. So it's the usual suspects again. The CFR membership has produced a stunning list of presidents and presidential candidates, often running against each other for the office. This is, getting back to what I said earlier about not being a dime's worth of difference between the two parties. For instance, Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson were both members of the CFR, as were JFK and Nixon, Humphrey and Nixon, McGovern and Nixon, Ford and Carter, Bush Sr. and Michael Dukakis, Clinton and Bush in 92, and Clinton and Dole in 96. Since 1952, only one presidential election featured non-CFR members from both parties at the same time. That was Johnson Goldwater in 64. And when Johnson won, he populated his administration with 387 CFR members. Okay, these people are policy makers. Sometimes, I'd hate to say it, but reducing our presidents to the status of puppets. They get their instructions, and they pass them along, and they're very, very important positions in the administration. Reagan's first-term administration featured 313 CFR members. Clinton's administration numbered nearly 100. President Obama is not CFR, but the top levels of his administration are filled with CFR members, which I list in a special chapter on Obama's administration. Former CFR member Admiral Chester Ward kind of left the group and blew the whistle on him. He said the single objective of the CFR is, quote, to bring about the surrender of the sovereignty and national independence of the United States. He added that CFR seeks a world banking monopoly over which power emerges to control the global government. In other words, they're going to back whoever winds up on top, whether it be China or the United States. They don't care, as long as they're pulling the strings. Ward also wrote, and this is a quote, "Once the ruling members of the CFR have decided that the U.S. government should adopt a particular policy, the very substantial research facilities of the CFR are put to work to develop arguments to support the new policy and discredit any opposition." Now, it's hard to single out any major U.S. foreign policy since Woodrow Wilson that was implemented in spite of CFR opposition. Senator Barry Goldwater warned that CFR favored curtailing personal freedoms of Americans and added, quote, there has been a great turnover in personnel, but no change in policy. Again, we're talking about, different parties coming into the presidency and policy remaining the same. That's because the CFR is embedded in every administration. CFR has a publication, Foreign Affairs, it's called. And even in that, they've admitted to globalist pursuits at the expense of U.S. sovereignty. In the 50th anniversary issue of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Kingman Brewster wrote, "Our national purpose would be to abolish American sovereignty and nationality." And in 1974, former State Department official Richard Gardner wrote in the publication, quote, "An end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned assault." So anyway, we have, we have an image forming here. Thomas Dye, Florida State political science professor, said the CFR contains a secretive inner circle called Special Group, charged with manipulating public opinion through studies and think tanks. And he adds that yet another CFR branch called the Secret Team includes top members of the executive and judicial branches of the U.S. government who create and implement policy. They are unelected. It's just, it's kind of the same setup as the Masons do. The people on the lower level, they don't really understand what the agenda is. It's these secret upper levels, and they actually manipulate these people to do their bidding. Now, the Trilateral Commission is much more recent. That was formed in the early 1970s by David Rockefeller to deflect press attention from the CFR. So, therefore, it's a lot more open than the CFR. But its agenda was presented in something called the Triangle Papers, which, according to author Gary Allen, reveal four major thrusts: rearranging the world monetary system, using U.S. resources to cause third world radicalism, increasing trade with communist nations, and gaining more economic control through energy crises. The economist Doug Henwood, formerly of The Nation, wrote that each member of the triad, as these members would be, of course, Europe, North America, and Asia, that's the triad, that each member has collected poor nations to act as sweatshops, plantations, and mines. The U.S. has Latin America, the EU has Eastern Europe and Africa, Japan has Southeast Asia and Taiwan, and Singapore. Southeast Asia with Taiwan. Singapore split between the U.S. and Japan, and India is shared by all three. The majority of the members of the Trilateral Commission come from global corporations, and the organization is funded by corporate-owned tax-exempt foundations, so there's no answering to the government for these folks.
Now, this fellow, Gary Allen, in the Rockefeller file.
Exactly, yeah. Gary's written a couple of really excellent books that I used as research for this.
How about these thrusts? Well,
actually, if you take a look at it, they've already got underway.
Yes, they have.
Gary Allen was dead on all four of them, I think. We've had our energy crises. We're probably headed into another one right now because they're talking about $6 gas. We did vastly increase trade with the communist nations. The third world, giving aid to the third world is, it gives the United States and other countries the right to literally loot their natural resources, which is what it's all about. And you can also get them to get on board with population reduction and things like that. All you have to do is withhold the aid that they've come to depend on so much.
He's got to be right, though. Thrust one, the European Union and the North American Free Trade Agreement, exactly. That is to lead to a North American Union, have come into being. An Asian Monetary Union currently is being arranged. Thrust two, the U.S. and Western nations have provided financial aid in the billions to third world nations, and as you just said, John, creating debt and agreements that allow a plundering of the emerging nations' national resources. This is really good. Thrust three, the U.S. trade exchange with the Soviet Union and China exploded with billions of dollars in American technology going to communist countries. And then thrust four, the Western globalists have profited from several energy crises, each one enriching them further while providing greater control of the world's oil reserves. So let's hold your thought structure, but let's just take a little side trip here for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Is it accelerating? Because it seems like it is. Is this thing being shifted into fifth gear and then finally sixth as what's going on here comes to the attention of the population at large?
Well, I don't know. You see what's going on in the oil-rich region of the Middle East. I mean, my God, there's, just in the last year, there have been all of these, uprisings. And, even though the governments were, sort of dictatorships, they were friendly to the United States. All of a sudden, we've got a major mixture of chaos in the Middle East. And I think that's what they want, because out of chaos for them comes success. So I don't know what to expect here in the Middle East, but things really look dark.
Do you know anything about this London School of Economics?
Well, yeah, it was, it's always been Marxist-leaning. The system that these oligarchs prefer is socialism, only because it's the best control system of a society that they've seen so far. They have no love for, socialistic ideals. It's just about control.
What about Soros?
Well,
how does he fit into the grand scheme of things, other than he's been a genius at currency trading?
Yeah, but I mean, it's just funny that he's funding the Democrats, but like I say, it really doesn't matter whether he funded the Democrats or the Republicans. It's because they're basically the same.
All right, then. What about the Bilderbergers? Tell us about them.
Oh, okay. Well, the Bilderberg Group is interesting because it's a collection of powerful men and women, many of them from European royalty, and they meet secretly each year, and this is truly secret. And they discuss and form policy. You have radical watchdog groups like Liberty Lobby that accuse the Bilderbergers of trying to create a world government and run by an unelected elite and replace national governments. But that's not that far off. The name Bilderberg probably came from the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Oosterbeek, Holland, where the first known meeting took place in 1954. Prince Bernhard of Holland, who was a former Nazi until the Germans invaded his country, is credited with organizing the group along with Dr. Joseph Redinger, a Polish socialist. Now, the group was extremely active in creating the European Union, helping to set up the 1957 Treaty of Rome that created the European Common Market. And in 1999, the euro became the common currency of every Western European nation except Britain, and the European Central Bank was created to handle the monetary policy in 2002. So you have a lot of their goals being taken care of, and these were all discussed in Bilderberg meetings prior to that. NATO was also a major preserve for Bilderbergers who wished to use it in eliminating national sovereignties of Europe and combine nations into an Anglo-American dominated whole. Charles de Gaulle saw through this, and that's why he refused to allow France to join NATO. The annual Bilderberg meetings have such strict security, and over the years, journalists have been harassed and even arrested for attempting to get inside, and some of them, were on public property and still were harassed. Daniel Estulin is a Canadian citizen, although his family came from Russia. He's been reporting on them for 2 decades now, and he has come up with some amazing things in his books. One of Estulin,
what is his name again, John?
Daniel Estulin, Estulin.
Okay.
Okay. He has sources inside the Bilderbergs. He calls them conscientious objectors, people who are not really, on the trolley with the rest of the Bilderberg thinking. One of his sources recorded Henry Kissinger making a speech on May 12, 1992, at a meeting in Evian, France. He said, quote, "Today Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow they will be grateful." So anyway, we have, that kind of internationalism, foreign troops coming into America and how to make Americans welcome that. Another of Estulin sources claimed to overhear Kissinger saying to Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in the late 1970s, quote, "Jimmy Carter is not the President of the United States. The Trilateral Commission is the President of the United States. I represent the Trilateral Commission." That kind of sounds like Henry, too.
You know, here's the thing, and I've said this a few times on the program. My father, I wish I could remember everything that he said. I'm trying. But he said this back when I was a kid, like in elementary school, and that's been a while. That's when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And he said that every president that goes into office has a little conversation as soon as he takes office, and he's never the same after that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, look at Obama here. Now, some people think, you're slamming Obama, you don't like him for this reason or that. That's just not true, because George Bush and several other presidents get beat up pretty regularly on this program when I'm sitting in the captain's chair.
Yeah.
But the thing is that he did not close Guantanamo, however good or bad an idea that might have been. He didn't do it. We did not terminate business with Venezuela. There have been reversals over and over and over again, and he has to keep a good face, you know, and go, yeah, we're just going this way. It's no big deal. But his strings are being pulled. It's obvious.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. And, you know, I mean, he has a miserable record in, in keeping his campaign promises. I mean,
they all do. In fact, I saw, I'm quite a Three Stooges aficionado, and Mo said during one of these deals they were doing, he said, "Oh, you can't believe all that stuff. That's a campaign promise." And
yeah.
It's like, well, that's really true, though. You know, I mean, once upon a time, people were enlightened enough to go, that's just a campaign promise. He's not going to do a bloody thing about it, you know?
Yeah, which makes me feel that Obama he's just another politician. And, I know a lot of people love the guy, but, to me, he's just another guy with his strings being pulled, you know?
Well, you know, and some of his friends aren't helping him either, like Ayers and Dorn and a bunch of other ones, you know, but there's always something you can throw against the wall, and if you keep throwing enough stuff against the wall, eventually some of it sticks. But in this case, so much stuff is being thrown against the wall that none of it is sticking. So that leads me to my next question, which is, so how massive is the PSYOPs, the psychological operation against the mass mind of our nation, and is it working or not? Are these guys really that smart?
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing I really hoped for in this book and writing it was to reach regular folks, okay? Not the believers, but people who are worried about, you know, the mortgage and, how am I going to get my kids